Kelsey says it's a true love story. Tanner and Meghan, he would do anything for her. He would never leave her, no matter what. Like I said, the town of Trenton is really small and close-knit. People wave, they say hi, everyone's really friendly with each other. It's too small of a town to get lost in. Well, that is until the evening of June 7th, 2017, when Sophia's daddy never came home. It was right before dinner when Tanner kissed little Sophia goodbye and popped out to visit a friend. He said, "I'm only gonna be gone 30 minutes." When his fiancée asked if he was gonna be home for dinner, his mom said, "I'm gonna grill some chicken and fix a salad." And he said, "Yeah, go ahead and fix a piece for me, 'cause I'll be right back." His mom asked where he was going, and he said, "I'm gonna go meet a friend." And when she asked who it was, he said, "Jeremiah." Jeremiah is a new friend of Tanner's and not really someone that Tanner's family really knows. Now, when Tanner's sister Kelsey was asked, "Who is this kid?" she said, "Good question. I've never heard of this kid in my life, and I know everyone in Trenton. And Jeremiah, well, I've never seen him." But hours later, dinner's cold, and Tanner did not come back. It was unusual behavior for Tanner, and his mom, Lisa, started asking, "Has anybody seen or talked to Tanner?" But no one had. And she was sitting there, and her and Kelsey were like, this is not like Tanner, not like him at all. Not to see him, not to hear from him, not for him to just show back up when he said that he would. Kelsey describes her brother as a happy person. He loved his baby, he loved his girlfriend, he loved his family, and he was making plans for their future. So, the next day, Kelsey starts looking for her brother, just like I would. She follows up on her suspicions. She finds out where this Jeremiah kid lives, and she goes there. She knocks on the door, but nobody answers. So, she tried the door, and it was unlocked. And she's thinking, okay, well, maybe they're just sleeping, and that's why they're not answering. But when she opens the door, she's met with a shock. The whole apartment was trashed. There was a huge hole in the wall, and the back door that leads outside of the apartment was wide open. And right there, within the overturned furniture and the wreckage, Kelsey sees something that makes her stop. Tanner's baseball cap. And she thinks, that's pretty weird because he never goes anywhere without it. Just one of those guys, So Kelsey takes his hat and she goes to the police. They promise to look into it, but they tell her, "Don't panic. We'll find him. He just ran away or hiding out somewhere, getting his mind right." And Kelsey is like, "No, that's not my brother." 2 weeks go by and Tanner doesn't come back. His mom is like, oh, nothing, it's stains. And Kelsey says, they don't look like stains. I'm calling the police. And Jeremiah says, okay, I'll meet you at the police station. And Kelsey's like, whatever, okay, fine, I'm calling him. And according to police chief Thomas Wright, Jeremiah was someone that they looked at hard. They talked to him a lot. And in fact, those talks started that very day at the police station. Chief Thomas Wright wants to do a test on that t-shirt. But according to Kelsey, Jeremiah is strangely reluctant. And Kelsey says, why? Why wouldn't you just willingly give over the t-shirt if there's nothing on it? And the police chief says, I don't know why he wouldn't hand it over, but I had to take it off of him. When Kelsey asks, does Jeremiah really have Tanner's shirt, or is it just one that looks like it? Chief Wright says, I don't know if it's Tanner's, and I don't know if it's blood spatter on the shirt. Chief Wright says there were a couple anomalies in the shirt, but I can't say that they're blood. But we certainly asked for them to be tested. They did do another test on Jeremiah, a voice stress test, and it did indicate some deception. And when Chief Wright was asked if Jeremiah was helpful in the investigation of Tanner Ward's disappearance, Chief Wright says, well, I would say that the young man tried. So, it's enough to lead the cops right back to Jeremiah's doorstep, and they start investigating. They go to his dad's property, and they do a search out there. They take cadaver dogs, and right outside the back door, the dogs get a hit at the burn pit. The police did a forensic dig there, and the site that they dug up was 6 foot wide by 10 foot long. Chief Wright said they went all the way down to the compacted earth, and then another foot using powerful equipment. Deep within this pile, bones were found, but it's a dead end. They had the bones looked at, and they were animal bones. So the cops are back. Square one. Tanner Ward's family is just left to wait for 6 more months. Kelsey says, you don't ever think that it's going to be the last time that you see someone. Police have questioned so many people to see if they have something to do with Tanner's disappearance. Everything's a dead end. They admit that they believe some foul play could be involved. And then, on a cold December morning, 6 months after Tanner disappeared, a truly heartbreaking discovery happens. 2 kids on their way to school report seeing a body in a tree. A corpse is spotted hanging from the neck up in a tree above a tangle of branches. The body itself is badly decomposed, making identification difficult, of course. The fingers are mummified, and the feet are missing. Chief Wright calls Tanner's father, Curtis Ward, to the scene. If it is Tanner, the chief doesn't want his dad to hear it from anyone else first. There were several articles of clothing at the scene. Shoes, pants, a sock. Chief Wright said all that stuff had been underneath there for a while, based on the way it looked and the stiffness of it. I'm so sorry about that loud car. Elissa with the news, and the two of them hold their breath waiting. An autopsy is conducted, and they check the dental records to confirm it is Tanner. And then they reveal what they believe is the cause of death. The preliminary findings rule it suicide. Chief Wright said the information we've obtained from the forensic pathologist is there were no injuries to Tanner's body other than what was sustained during the fall from the tree around the neck. This devastates Tanner's parents and clears some previous persons of interest, i.e. Jeremiah. Lisa Ward is adamant that her son did not commit suicide. She says it just doesn't make sense. If I truly believe that my son put himself in that tree, maybe I could accept it. But there's not a fiber in my body that believes my son killed himself, said Lisa. She said there's absolutely no signs that Tanner would take his own life. There was no note. He was not suicidal. He did not have suicidal tendencies. He was very involved with his family. In fact, Lisa says Tanner had everything to live for. He was making plans for Father's Day weekend, making plans for when his dad got back from deployment. Even as Tanner's family tries to come to grips with this, the rumor mill in the small town of Trenton goes into overdrive. Kelsey and Lisa start getting all these text messages, tips, and things about what people believe really happened to Tanner. Lisa's inbox fills with hints and clues from Tanner's friends and total strangers, all of them painting a picture not of suicide, but of something far more sinister. One tip says he was tortured for 4 months, and then they killed him and kept him in a freezer. That one keeps Tanner's family up at night. They got messages that people beat him with baseball bats, that they tortured him, hung him in a well or a fruit cellar, and kept him alive, but unfortunately, during the torture, he died. These messages were very clear, though. Tanner did not commit suicide. Someone murdered him. Kelsey says, I think he was tortured, honestly. I think he was alive for months, and then they just killed him because they didn't know what to do. And only later was Tanner's body hung up in that tree in a staged suicide. Chief Wright believes there's just a lot of people feeding the fire and says that those various theories are just a bad game of telephone. There's been a lot of folks that have come forward with information that they really don't have anything, says Wright. They get secondhand information, it gets distributed, it gets added to, and by the time it gets to us, it's very convoluted and difficult to follow. A lot of people have really good theories, of course, but the evidence just isn't there. But Tanner's family says, oh yes it is. You need to look no further than Tanner himself. Lisa says, when my husband told me that he was on site when they took the body down, he described to me what Tanner's body looked like and the fact that it was mummified. In north central Missouri, it's very humid and moist. There's a lot of moisture, rain, thunderstorms that come through our area from June to September. In order for a body to mummify, it has to be away from humidity and away from moisture. It wasn't decomposed enough. There were no signs that insects had been on him, that birds had touched him. Nothing. Tanner's family says there's no way that Tanner's body hung in that tree for 6 months, exposed to the heat of summer. messages that he was buried, dug up, moved, put in a freezer, thawed out, all that sorts of stuff. Can you imagine getting messages like that? Was it rumor? Speculation? I mean, who knows? But it matches up to some things that the family says isn't in question. And these things match an eyewitness who was at a construction site just yards from where Tanner was found. He said to Elissa, "Ma'am, I have been 10 feet in front of that tree multiple times this entire year. I can assure you he was not in the tree at that time. And their work storage building is 25 feet from that tree. 25 feet in July, August, and September. Pretty stingy, wouldn't you think? Somebody would smell something," says Lisa. Lisa says, "I believe that my son did not put himself in that tree. He did not hang there for 6 months." Tanner's family says eyewitnesses prove that his body was not there that whole time. In fact, Tanner's childhood friend was the first to discover Tanner hanging in that tree on that day in December. He can't shake the images of what he and his girlfriend saw on their way to high school that morning. He relates that it was a windy day, so they heard the wind and they heard the tree creak, and that's what made them look up. And at first they thought it wasn't real, and they said they walk that path 2 or 3 days a week, him and her, and neither one of them had seen anything. They don't believe that Tanner could have mistaken Tanner for part of the tree. He was wearing a gray t-shirt and dark blue jeans, and they were right by there every time they walked by. Tanner's childhood friend isn't the only one who walked that area. A girl named Veronica, who's a close friend of Tanner's sister Kelsey, got even closer less than a week before Tanner was discovered. She said, "We went right through there, my son and I. He went to go play, and I was standing right underneath it. I didn't notice anything, and I feel like I definitely would have noticed." Police say that evidence shows Tanner had been hanging there a while. The forensic pathologist said that the body had been there the duration of the time that it's been dead. The path on both sides is lined with honeysuckle, and the stuff was probably 10 feet tall that they had to cut. I mean, he was like 20 feet up, so he still would have been well above the honeysuckle, if you ask me. "It is unusual, and it does give reason to pause," said Chief Wright, "but I think we have to look at a couple things. People don't look up. You know, you've been here probably an hour looking around and can't tell me what's behind you because people don't look. People don't look up. Now, okay, not noticing a bookshelf, fine. Not noticing a dead body swinging from a tree, I think people would notice that." Chief Wright says, "I don't have an explanation why nobody saw him before, but it doesn't matter. I think he's been there this entire time." But Tanner disappeared 6 months before he was found. His family says in all that time somebody would have noticed something, and now they're convinced he was killed somewhere else and then hung in that tree months later. It's a mystery that haunts his mother and sister, and every day they wonder if he paid the price for past sins. As I mentioned before, he had some troubled teenage years, and his mom describes him as not an angel, but not the worst person in the world either. He had some trouble with the law shortly before he disappeared. He had started to use drugs pretty heavily, and he was taking Kelsey confirms, yeah, Tanner was a regular pot smoker, but that it's not just casual drug use. Tanner's history involved a pretty violent confrontation about a year before he vanished. He was on probation for a home invasion in 2016, in which he and his brother broke into a home with weapons. It all started an angry teenage dispute over a drug deal that led to Tanner and his brother Tyler showing up at the house with a gun and not allowing people to leave. Text messages sent to Elissa say that this incident set off a violent war of retribution involving Tanner's friend Jeremiah and his upstairs neighbor Stephanie Miller. One of the people that were allegedly held hostage was the daughter of Stephanie Miller, and Stephanie didn't appreciate this and decided to retaliate. Kelsey says, yeah, she did, but we were told it wasn't supposed to get this bad. They didn't intentionally kill him. They were just supposed to beat him and let him go, but Tanner decided to fight back, and that's when things went south. Stephanie Miller's daughter is never listed in any police reports surrounding the home invasion, but Tanner's sister says pictures of the baseball bat in the back of an abandoned car help prove her theory that her brother was kidnapped, beaten, and tortured. Stephanie Miller has never been charged, never been named a suspect, or even a person of interest in Tanner Ward's death. Chief Wright says he's heard all the stories, and there's just no evidence to support any of the Ward family's theories. Throughout the investigation, there was about 9 different people who reportedly were involved in Tanner's death, 4 different methodologies, and none of those present in the post-mortem, said Chief Wright. So again, how do you make a homicide bullet hole in the head? You can't stab somebody repeatedly in the back and not have puncture wounds in the back. How do you make a homicide case off of information when there's no credible evidence? It's absolutely crazy to me. Now, Chief Wright said that he believes that Tanner Ward committed suicide, and this is a conclusion that Tanner's mom is just not willing to accept. They had a second autopsy done, a private autopsy done. Lisa says she just couldn't get past the fact that people would come and knock on their door and give them information if these people didn't feel like there was some truth to it. The police's preliminary autopsy points towards suicide, but Tanner's family hired an independent pathologist who is now studying Tanner Ward's remains. Lisa believes that they will come back as some kind of homicide. She reaches out to a woman named Susan Alexander. This woman is the vice president of the Missing and Endangered of Northwest Missouri. And she says, I do not believe that this was a suicide. I think it was a homicide. Tanner was a wonderful dad. He had so many reasons to live. It's very unlikely he committed suicide. Susan Alexander is more than just emotional support for the Ward family. She says, nobody told us what all was going to come out when we started this. And she's helping Tanner's mom through this maze of truth and innuendo. She says, I think as a mother, you would have to see it. The only thing we're asking Chief Wright to do is to show us these 10,000 pages of stuff that he's got. Bring the books out in front of us so we can compare. This person said this person said that. But they haven't done that with the Ward family. Now, Crime Watch Daily went to an expert, Dr. Bill Smock. He was a police surgeon with the Louisville Metro Police Department for more than 2 decades, and he's examined the bodies of countless victims, both suicides and murders. Dr. Smock scratches. It's elongating. His body was mummified. It had obviously been hanging there for a while. As far as the conditions outside in Missouri from June to December, allowing the mummification process, Missouri is very hot in the summer, so yeah, if he's out, it's humid, in a temperate environment, you can have mummification in 3 months. In hot, dry, 2 months or less, says Dr. Smock. And when he's asked about the indentation on the tree branch where the rope was, that says he's been there for a long time, said Smock. So that takes us back to the family's fundamental question. If Tanner's body was hanging in this tree for a significant amount of time, how in the world did no one see it? You've got wind, said Smock. You may not smell anything. It was summer going into fall, so there's foliage on the trees. I don't know. I saw a picture. I'm thinking people would have seen it. Dr. Smock says perhaps, but the body is so elongated, people think, is it a tree branch? Is it a limb? No, it's not unusual for bodies to be out in the wood for months, and then the foliage comes off, and you're walking and happen to look up right at the right time. Because when you walk, are you always looking up? Are you looking down? Are you looking straight ahead? But there are some things with the state of Tanner's body that can't be revealed for sure. The family contends that Tanner was kidnapped and tortured for months. And that's what they've been hearing. Dr. Smock says, could have happened. When somebody is mummified, you lose a lot of forensic evidence. The internal organs will be gone, decayed, and the only thing left really are bones. Maybe some marks on the external tissue, but even the bruising, any injury would be gone. So even if Tanner's body was in that tree throughout the Missouri summer, one question still remains. When he was asked, what does your gut tell you? Did Tanner Ward commit suicide, or was he murdered? Dr. Smock says, this was, I don't know. Could it be suicide? Sure. Could it have been a homicide set up to look like a suicide? Sure. Someone else took a look at the autopsy. Maybe something was missed, but at this point we'll probably never know. That might be the most heartbreaking conclusion of all. An unknown cause of death, leaving a family tortured in their grief, and a little girl who may always wonder what happened to her daddy. I didn't look to see if the DNA tests were done on Tanner's shirt that Jeremiah was wearing. I am fully convinced that someone killed him and put him in that tree. I don't think that he would commit suicide. I don't even know if they looked to see if there was a possible way he could climb up that high and then jump. I guess I didn't get close looks at the tree. I only saw like the path, and there was like a circle drawn around where he was hanging. Somebody would have seen a body hanging in a tree for 6 months. It was a pretty well walked pathway. I don't think that there's any way that he hung there from June until December without anyone seeing, smelling anything, especially if the trees are creaking, and that's what made people look up. I think he went to that apartment where Jeremiah lived and got jumped. I think he put up a fight, and that's why the furniture was he was just looking at pictures of Tanner's body, so I find the bruises were supposedly all gone because he was mummified, so you couldn't really tell if he'd been beat up. Yeah, he could have had the crap kicked out of him, but if they didn't break anything, then you wouldn't have been able to tell because all of the external wounds would have been gone. And I just think that's absolutely crazy. And I can't imagine being his family living in this small town and everyone has a theory. And I'm sure that some of those theories are absolutely outlandish, but I'm also sure that some of those theories have his mom, his sister, his fiancée Meghan laying awake at night just wondering what he went through in those last terrible hours of his life. And I feel so sorry for pretty little Sophia, who won't know her daddy. I lost my dad at 31, and I can't even, that wasn't enough time. She probably won't even remember him. Oh, just so sad. Anyway, I'm quite curious to know what you guys think of this murder or suicide case. I keep landing on these somehow. I actually clicked on the article because I recognized Tanner's face. I follow this group on Facebook of Unsolved and Unburied or something, and that's where I saw his face and I was like, wait a minute, I know that face. And I do, because living in neighboring Illinois, I did see missing posters, I remember. Just sad. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you could, it helps me a lot if you like and subscribe to my channel. I do have a Patreon where I'm doing a series over there of reading to you, and I am also doing true crime. But I appreciate each and every one of you for being here, and I will see you next time. We're going to start a new series here on my channel in January. I've got it all planned out. I've actually got the first video all researched, and I am looking quite forward to it. It might be 2 parts, I don't know. Or it'll be an extra long video. Which do you guys prefer? I've noticed a lot of times when I do more than 1 part, the second video doesn't get as many views. So maybe I'll just make 1 long video.